I've got a share, but it's not coming from me. It's me. Shared it earlier in the week. It's basically backing up what you were saying the other night about the mutants and that. She said she was viewing them. She said she was viewing them. She said she was up on a cloud, but she was in a group of people, obviously a group of new friends, and then there was another group of new friends on the opposing cloud. But he said there was watching them, but like there was having the view they was getting was ringside seats, so basically they could see everything, but they weren't down amongst it, if you know what I mean. And yeah, she says there was all these mutants going like rampaging, going mad, going everywhere, and attacking. She said there was actually, I think she said there was attacking zombies. Yeah, zombies on the real side, the ones with the black eyes. And she said it wasn't very nice. She said it was all like black oil, and like there was a load of these zombies destroyed. There was a black oil. There was like this black oil all on the floor and that. And she said there was a massive, like must have been like King of the Mutants or something that came. And she said it was massive. She said all she could remember about it was this big, massive mutant face. And she said that was where it stopped.
I was sitting on a couch in a ground floor room somewhere. I didn't see much else of the room to be able to compare it with anywhere in particular. Next to me sat my now long deceased in the physical father. I was vaguely aware of others in the room, but as is so often the case on the real side, I couldn't see them. Next thing I knew, my old dad was on his back on the floor, halfway under the couch. I noticed for the first time he was wearing a black suit with a white shirt, but no tie. I had rarely seen him so smartly dressed. Suddenly it hit me, he was dead, and I started to desperately pull him out. I believe one or two of the others helped, and that was it, dream over. But my thoughts on the thing. As I have recorded previously, my father, and to a lesser extent my mother, frequently appear in my dreams, more so lately than previously. I realise it's likely that often as not, they are actually real universal guides in disguise. But on this occasion I get the definite feeling it was really him. The overwhelmingly sad feeling I'm getting from this dream was that he was telling me that it was now his time to move on, and he wouldn't be able to visit me anymore. Sad for me, selfishly of course, but undoubtedly good for him to be called to move on to higher and better things, perhaps. I know we will meet again sometime in the great scheme of things, when I've finally made the grade. I've got to start with the second one actually, because it sort of almost links with it. Until I started writing this, I hadn't realised that there is an obvious link between this, the second dream I remember from the same night's sleep, though some hours apart, during which I woke up briefly, and the previous one just discussed. The setting was in fact the back garden of the first of two houses I shared with my parents and big sister from my time of birth, or very short thereafter, in 1946 to the age of 17 in 1964 when we moved to the second one. It was basically a fair copy of the original on the physical side. The house itself was a small two-up, two-down terraced one built around the beginning of the 20th century in Saxon Road, Luton, England. Being a narrow plot, the back garden was a longish, slender rectangle with a small lawn bordered by a footpath, at the other right-hand side as you walk down it being a modest flower bed. At the bottom stood my dad's shed, which he had extended to the right when I was in my early teens, so I too could have a workbench and place to keep my growing collection of tools. I spent so many happy hours with him in that shed. Between the shed and the lawn was a good-sized rockery, which my dad had made when he decommissioned the small air raid shelter that occupied the space during World War II. That shelter had almost seen action when, as my mother told us very many times, One day when my dad was home briefly on leave from the army, he'd suddenly noticed a solitary, strangely slender aeroplane almost overhead. Realising it was a Dornier, flying pencil as they were called here, he shouted, "It's a Jerry bomber!" and quickly herded my mum and my future big sister down below, noticing as he did so the plane releasing its single egg somewhere over the town. It was probably aiming for the Vauxhall plant, which was busily turning out Bedford Army trucks and Churchill tanks. I never heard where it landed. Unlike the V2 that later in the war demolished part of the comma truck factory with my future mum working in it, luckily up the other end, assembling the back brakes for army trucks. It was said that all they found of the gate man was the brass buttons from his tunic. Anyway, to get back to the dream, the aforesaid rockery and lawn were absent. It appeared to be just empty soil. And this is where it gets rather weird and a bit incomprehensible. For some reason, I needed to climb up the front of the shed and achieve the apex of the house-like pointed roof, which was to happen then. What was to happen then, I've no idea. But to be able to achieve this, I first had to put together some kind of either wire or string layout pegged down in the mud, and was having some difficulty doing this. In the middle of all this, I noticed there were 3 of my shirts hanging on the washing line, which ran down the length of the garden alongside the path. It had evidently been a cold, wintry day, and the shirts were frozen stiff like cardboard. The one at the end nearest the shed was grey, and I noticed very tatty with what almost looked like chunks of the tail bitten off. I detached it from the clothes pegs and somehow managed to screw it up into a ball, and then disposed of it in a large rectangular bunker next to the house. This feature had not existed on the physical. The dream faded away with me back at the strings, still trying to get whatever it was right. The link between the 2 dreams is of course my father, although not physically, if that's the right term for the real side, present in the second one. He was in his workmanship, as symbolised by the professional job he had made of extending the shed. Also, in my memory at least, the photo I had seen of the air raid shelter, which showed a much better job than most people would have made with the very basic kits they were provided with. None of them were, of course, survived a direct hit. They were really only protection against flying debris from a nearby attack. "If you seek his monument, look around," was what they said of Sir Christopher Wren, architect of, amongst others, St Paul's Cathedral in London. I think that would have been aptly applied to my old dad at both houses I shared with him. His visible absence in Dream 2 seems to follow on from Dream 1, and the mess I was getting into with the strings or wire, the immediate effect of his not being there to guide me. Obviously, I was intending to ascend the shed, presumably towards better things, but couldn't even get the show on the road. This is rather depressing. I can only deduce that the shirt episode was to underline the fact that I still have much rubbish or baggage to unload before I can hope to proceed. And that's the end of it. If Duane wishes to comment on that.
Well, you said it, Peter. It's fine, and you're moving along with this, so you have your understanding of it. It's better and better. So, no, it's fine. Thank you for sharing, and yeah, that's fine.